My name is Eleanor Whitlock and I am 23 years old. 3 weeks ago I stood on a graduation stage in front of 4,000 people while my parents, the same people who once told me I was not worth the cost of a single semester, sat in the front row with their faces drained of color. They had come to watch my twin sister graduate. They had no idea I was even on that campus. They certainly did not know I was the one about to walk up to that podium and give the closing address. But this story does not begin at graduation. It begins 5 years earlier in my parents' dining room in Denver, Colorado, on a rainy Tuesday evening, when my father looked at me across the table and said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Before I take you back there, let me ask you something. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever worked twice as hard just to be noticed half as much, stay with me until the end of this story. I think you will see yourself in it. Now let me take you back to that spring of the year I turned 18. The acceptance letters arrived within 2 days of each other in early April. My sister Vivian got into Ashford University, a private school out east with a yearly cost of $72,000. I got into Maple Ridge State, a respected public university with a yearly cost of $23,000. Still a large amount of money for most families, but nothing compared to Ashford. That Tuesday evening my father called what he liked to call a family meeting. He never called these meetings for anything joyful. He called them when money was involved. We sat in the dining room instead of the living room that night, which already told me something was different. My father Gerald sat at the head of the table like a man about to deliver a verdict. My mother Patricia sat beside him, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Vivian sat across from me, practically glowing, bouncing her knee under the table because she already knew what was coming. I sat there holding my acceptance letter like it was the only solid thing left in the room. Vivian, my father began, we are going to cover everything for Ashford. Tuition, housing, meals, all of it. Vivian let out a small excited sound. My mother smiled at her like she had just won an award. Then my father turned to me, and the room felt colder than it had a second before. Eleanor, he said, we have decided not to fund your education. For a moment the words simply did not land. I am not trying to be cruel, he continued, but you have to understand how we think about this. Vivian has the personality for success. She makes connections easily. She will build a life that benefits this whole family. Investing in her is simply the smart decision. He paused, and then he said the part that has replayed in my head every single day since. You are smart enough, Eleanor, but you are not the kind of investment that pays off. There is no return with you. I looked at my mother, hoping she would disagree, hoping she would say something. She looked down at her folded hands instead. I looked at Vivian. She had already taken her phone out under the table, probably texting a friend about Ashford. My father shrugged and told me I was resourceful, that I would figure something out. That night I did not cry. I had used up all my tears over the years, over the missed school events, the secondhand everything, the way I always seemed to disappear from family photographs. Instead I sat alone in my room and understood something that would shape the next 4 years of my life. To my parents I was not a daughter. I was a line item that did not make financial sense. What my father did not know that night was that his decision would not break me the way he expected. It would build something in me instead, something he would not understand the size of until he was sitting in an audience of thousands watching it stand on a stage. The truth is that this had never been new. The unevenness between Vivian and me had always been part of our house, the kind of thing everyone in the family quietly agreed not to mention out loud. When we turned 16, Vivian received a brand new car with a bow tied around the mirror. I received her old laptop, the one with a cracked corner of the screen and a battery that barely lasted half an hour. We cannot afford 2 vehicles right now, my mother had said, even though somehow they could afford Vivian's ski trips, her designer dresses for school dances, her summer trip to Italy with her friends. Family vacations were always the clearest example. Vivian got her own hotel room every single time. I slept on a cot in a hallway closet once, which the resort staff cheerfully called a cozy extra space. In every photograph from those trips Vivian stood in the center, lit perfectly, smiling for the camera. I was almost always at the very edge of the frame, sometimes with half my body cut out of the picture entirely, like an afterthought someone forgot to crop out completely. When I finally asked my mother about it when I was 17, desperate for some kind of explanation, she only sighed and told me I was imagining things, that they loved both of us the same. But actions tell a different story than words do. A few months before that dining room conversation, I found my mother's phone left open on the kitchen counter. There was a message thread open with my Aunt Carol. I should not have read it but I did. Poor Eleanor, my mother had written, but Gerald is right, she does not stand out the way Vivian does, we have to be practical about where we put our resources. I set the phone down gently and walked away without saying a word. That night I made a decision that I told absolutely no one about, not out of a desire for revenge, but because I needed to prove something to myself before I could prove anything to anyone else. I opened my old cracked laptop and typed into the search bar, "full scholarships for students without family support." The page loaded slowly on my weak internet connection, but what I found that night would eventually change the entire direction of my life. I sat on my bedroom floor at 2 in the morning with a notebook and a calculator doing the math. Maple Ridge State cost $23,000 a year. Over 4 years that came to $92,000. My parents' contribution was zero. My total savings from 2 summers of part-time work came to $1,900. The gap between what I had and what I needed was enormous. If I could not close it, I saw 3 possible futures ahead of me. I could drop out before I even started. I could take on 6 figures of student debt that would follow me for the next 20 years. Or I could go part-time and stretch 4 years of school into 7 or 8 while working full-time the entire way through. Every single path led to the exact same place, becoming the thing my father had already decided I was, the disappointment, the bad investment, the twin who did not measure up. I could already picture the holiday conversations to come. Vivian is doing wonderfully at Ashford. Eleanor, well, she is still figuring things out. But this was never only about proving my father wrong. It became, somewhere in those long nights, about proving myself right. I scrolled through scholarship databases until my eyes burned from the screen light. Most required letters of recommendation, long essays, proof of need that I technically did not qualify for since my parents' income on paper looked fine even though none of it was coming to me. Some listings were outdated, others were clearly scams. Then I found something worth saving. Maple Ridge had an internal program for first-generation and independent students, full tuition coverage plus a small living stipend, but only 5 students were chosen each year out of hundreds of applicants. I bookmarked it and kept searching. That is when I first came across the name that would eventually change everything. The Callaway Scholars Program, full tuition, $12,000 a year for living costs, awarded to only 20 students nationwide out of thousands of applicants. I actually laughed out loud sitting alone on my floor. 20 students in the entire country. What chance did a girl from a public high school in Denver actually have? But I bookmarked it anyway, because some quiet part of me refused to let it go. I had 2 choices in front of me. Accept the life my parents had already decided for me, or build a different one with my own 2 hands. I chose to build. But building required a plan, and I needed one immediately, because the deposit deadline for Maple Ridge was only weeks away. I filled an entire notebook that summer. Every page held a new calculation. Every margin was crowded with backup plans. Job number 1 would be opening shifts at a coffee shop near campus called The Daily Grind, 5 in the morning until 8, bringing in roughly $700 a month. Job number 2 would be weekend cleaning shifts in the dormitories, another $350 a month. Job number 3, if I could land it, would be a teaching assistant position in the economics department, worth another $250 a month. Added together that came to roughly $1,300 a month, about $15,600 a year. Still nearly $8,000 short of tuition every single year. That gap would have to be closed with merit scholarships, the kind you earn through effort rather than the kind handed to you by family. I found the cheapest housing option within walking distance of campus, a small shared room in a house with 4 other students for $280 a month, utilities included, no air conditioning, almost no privacy. It would have to work. My schedule settled into something brutal but exact. 5 in the morning at the coffee shop. 9 to 5, classes. 6 to 10 in the evening, studying or working a shift or covering teaching assistant hours. Sleep from 11 at night until 4 in the morning. 5 hours a night for 4 straight years. The week before I left for college, Vivian posted photographs from a beach trip with her friends, sunset skies, laughter, drinks with little umbrellas in them. I was folding a thrift store comforter into a second-hand duffel bag. Our lives had already started splitting apart and we had not even begun yet. But here is what kept me moving forward every single night before I fell asleep. I would whisper the same sentence to myself in the dark. This is the price of freedom. Freedom from their expectations. Freedom from their judgment. Freedom from needing anyone's approval ever again. I had no idea yet how true that would turn out to be. And I had no idea that somewhere on the Maple Ridge campus there was a professor who would eventually see something in me that my own parents never once looked closely enough to find. My first Thanksgiving away from home, I sat alone in my small rented room with my phone pressed against my ear, listening to the sounds of a celebration I was not part of. There was laughter in the background, the clinking of dishes, the warm noise of a family gathered together without me. "Hello, Eleanor," my mother said, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom, happy Thanksgiving," I said. "Oh yes, happy Thanksgiving, honey, how are you doing?" "I am okay," I said. "Is Dad there, can I talk to him?" There was a pause. Then I heard his voice faintly in the background, muffled but clear enough. "Tell her I am busy right now." The words landed like a stone dropping into water. My mother came back on the line, her voice suddenly artificially bright. "Your father is right in the middle of something. Vivian is telling the funniest story." "It is fine, Mom," I said. "Are you eating enough? Do you need anything?" I looked around my tiny room at the instant noodles on my desk, at the second-hand blanket folded at the foot of my bed, at the textbook I had borrowed from the library because I could not afford to buy my own copy. "No, Mom, I do not need anything." "Okay, well, we love you," she said. "Love you too," I said, and hung up. I opened social media a few minutes later out of habit, and the first thing in my feed was a photograph Vivian had just posted. My mother, my father, and Vivian sitting around the dining table, candles lit, a full turkey gleaming under the light. The caption read, "Grateful for my wonderful family." I zoomed in on the picture without meaning to. There were 3 place settings on the table. 3 chairs, not 4. They had not even set a place for me at the table, they were sitting at hundreds of miles away. I sat there for a long time staring at that photograph. Something shifted in me that night that I am still not sure how to fully describe. The old ache I had carried for years, the longing for their approval and attention, it did not disappear, but it changed shape. It hollowed itself out, and in the space where the pain used to live, there was only a kind of quiet emptiness. Strangely, that emptiness gave me something the pain never had. It gave me clarity. During the second semester of my freshman year, I took introductory microeconomics with a professor named Dr. Helena Voss, who was something of a legend on campus. She had been teaching for almost 30 years, had published research in some of the biggest journals in the field, and had a reputation that made students nervous before they even walked into her classroom. People whispered that she had not given a single perfect grade in 5 years. I sat in the 3rd row, took careful notes, and turned in my first essay expecting a grade somewhere in the middle of the pack at best. The paper came back with 2 words written at the top in red ink, "Exceptional work," and beneath that a short note, "See me after class." My stomach dropped as I walked up to her desk after the lecture ended. She was already gathering her things, gray hair pulled back into a tight bun, reading glasses pushed low on her nose. "Eleanor Whitlock," she said without looking up. "Yes, Ma'am," I answered. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She looked at me over the top of her glasses and told me that essay was some of the strongest undergraduate writing she had seen in 2 decades of teaching. "Where did you study before this?" she asked. "Nowhere special," I told her, "just a public high school, nothing advanced." "And your family?" she asked. "Are they academics?" I hesitated for a moment before answering honestly. "My family does not support my education, financially or in any other way," I said. The words came out before I even decided to say them. Dr. Voss set her pen down and told me to tell her more. So for the first time since arriving on campus, I told someone everything. The favoritism, the dining room conversation, the 3 jobs, the 5 hours of sleep a night, all of it poured out of me in that quiet classroom. When I finished, she sat in silence for a long moment. Then she asked if I had ever heard of the Callaway Scholars Program. I told her I had seen it online but assumed it was completely out of reach. 20 students nationwide, she said, full tuition, a living stipend, and the recipients at partner universities are given the honor of speaking at their commencement ceremony. She leaned forward across her desk. "Eleanor, you have real potential, extraordinary potential even, but potential means very little if no one with influence ever sees it. Let me help make sure you are seen." The following 2 years blurred together into one long relentless rhythm. Wake at 4 in the morning, coffee shop by 5, classes by 9, library until midnight most nights, sleep, repeat. I missed every party, every football game, every late night gathering my classmates talked about the next day. While other students were building memories, I was building a transcript, a perfect grade average across 6 consecutive semesters. There were moments I genuinely thought I might break. Once I fainted during a shift at the coffee shop from sheer exhaustion and mild dehydration, according to the urgent care doctor who saw me. I was back behind the counter the next morning anyway because I could not afford to lose the shift. Another time I sat alone in a borrowed car in an empty parking lot and cried for almost 20 minutes straight, not because anything specific had happened that day, but because years of everything seemed to catch up with me all at once. But each time, I kept going. During my junior year, Dr. Voss called me into her office and told me she wanted to formally nominate me for the Callaway Scholars Program. I stared at her, asking if she was serious. She told me it would require 10 separate essays and 3 full rounds of interviews, that it would be the hardest thing I had ever attempted. Then she added quietly, "But you have already survived harder than this." The application process consumed nearly 3 months of my life. Essays on resilience, leadership, and personal vision. Phone interviews with panels of professors from around the country. Background checks and letters of reference. Somewhere in the middle of all of it, Vivian texted me for the first time in months. "Mom says you do not come home for Christmas anymore. That is kind of sad, honestly." I read the message twice, set my phone face down on the desk, and went back to writing my essay. The truth was simpler than anything I could have explained to her in a text message. I could not afford a plane ticket home. And even if I could have, I was not entirely sure I wanted to use it. That Christmas I sat alone in my small rented room with a cup of instant noodles and a tiny handmade paper tree my friend Maya had made for me as a joke. No family, no presents, no tension hanging in the air. It turned out to be one of the most peaceful holidays I had experienced in years. The email arrived at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning in September of my senior year. The subject line read, "Callaway Foundation, Final Round Notification." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll through it. "Dear Miss Whitlock, congratulations, out of over 200 applicants you have been selected as one of 50 finalists for the Callaway Scholars Program. The final round will consist of an in-person interview at our headquarters in Chicago. 50 finalists, 20 winners. On paper that gave me a 40% chance, if everything else were equal. But things were never equal for me. The interview was scheduled for a Friday in Chicago, nearly 1,000 miles from where I was living. I checked my bank account and found $812 sitting there. A last-minute plane ticket would cost at least $400, and a hotel room would eat up most of what remained, with rent due in just 2 weeks. I was about to close my laptop and accept that I simply could not go when my roommate Maya knocked on my door. She took one look at my face and asked what was wrong. I showed her the email and she screamed, an actual scream of excitement that probably woke the neighbors. "You are absolutely going," she said, end of discussion. I told her I could not afford it. She told me there was a bus ticket leaving Thursday night for $58, arriving in Chicago early Friday morning. "I will lend you the rest of what you need," she said. I told her I could not ask that of her. "You are not asking," she said, "I am telling you. This is your shot and you do not get a second one." So I took the overnight bus, 9 hours through the dark with a stiff neck and a blazer Maya had found for me at a thrift store that morning. I arrived in Chicago at 5 in the morning. The interview waiting room was full of polished candidates in expensive clothing, some with parents waiting nearby looking relaxed and confident. I looked down at my second-hand outfit and scuffed shoes and thought, I do not belong in this room. Then I remembered something Dr. Voss had told me before I left. You do not need to belong here, you need to show them why you deserve to. 2 weeks after that interview I was walking to my early morning shift when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The subject line read, Callaway Scholars Program, Decision. I stopped walking right in the middle of the sidewalk. A cyclist swerved around me, shouting something I did not hear. I opened the email with trembling hands. Dear Miss Whitlock, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Callaway Scholar for the upcoming graduating class. I read it 3 times, then a 4th, then I sat down right there on the curb and cried. Not quiet graceful tears but loud heaving sobs that made strangers passing by turn and stare. Years of exhaustion and loneliness and grinding determination came pouring out of me on a sidewalk outside a coffee shop at 7 in the morning. I was officially a Callaway Scholar, full tuition covered, $12,000 a year for living expenses, and the right to transfer to any partner university within the program network. That evening Dr. Voss called me personally to congratulate me. There is something else you should know, she said. The program allows scholars to transfer to a partner school for their final year. Ashford University is on that list. Ashford, my sister's school. If you transfer there, she continued, you would graduate with top academic honors, and as the Callaway Scholar you would be asked to deliver part of the commencement address. My breath caught in my throat. Eleanor, she said, you would be standing on that stage in front of everyone. I thought about my parents sitting in that audience for Vivian's big day, completely unaware that I would also be there. I am not doing this for revenge, I said quietly into the phone. I know, she said. I am doing it because Ashford genuinely has the stronger program for what I want to study next, I added. I know that too, she said. There was a brief pause before she continued. But if they happen to see you shine while you are there, that is simply a bonus, nothing more. I made my decision that night and told absolutely no one in my family. 3 weeks into my final semester at Ashford, it happened. I was tucked into a quiet corner of the university library on the 3rd floor, deep into a constitutional law textbook, when I heard a voice that made my stomach drop instantly. Oh my God, Eleanor. I looked up. Vivian stood 3 feet away holding a half-finished iced coffee, her mouth hanging open in shock. What are you doing here? How long have you been here? She asked, barely forming complete sentences. I closed my book calmly and told her hello. You go here, she said. Since when? Mom and Dad never said anything. Mom and Dad do not know, I told her. She blinked at me, confused, asking what I meant by that. Exactly what I said, I told her. They do not know I am here. She set her coffee down on the nearby table, still staring at me like I had appeared out of thin air. But how? She asked. They are not paying for, I mean, how did you? I paid for Ashford myself, I told her. I transferred here on a scholarship. The word hung in the air between us. Her expression shifted through confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like shame. Why did you not tell anyone? She asked. I looked at my twin sister, the one who had received everything I had been denied, the one who had never once asked in 4 years how I was managing to survive on my own. Did you ever ask? I said. She opened her mouth, then closed it again without answering. I gathered my books and told her I needed to get to class. Eleanor, wait, she said, grabbing my arm. Do you hate us? Do you hate the family? I looked down at her hand on my sleeve, then back up at her face. No, I said quietly, you cannot hate people you have already stopped expecting anything from. I pulled my arm free and walked away. That night my phone lit up with missed calls, my mother, my father, then Vivian again. I silenced every single one of them. Whatever was coming next would happen on my own terms, not theirs. Vivian called our parents the moment she got back to her apartment that evening. I know this because she told me about it much later, once everything had already unfolded. She is here, Vivian had said, barely through her own front door. Eleanor is at Ashford, she has been here since the fall semester started. According to Vivian, there was a full 10 seconds of silence on the other end of the call before my father finally spoke. That is not possible, he said, she does not have the money for that school. She said something about a scholarship, Vivian told him. What scholarship? He asked. She is not exactly scholarship material. Dad, I saw her with my own eyes in the library, Vivian said. I will handle this, he told her, and ended the call. My father called my number the next morning, the first time he had dialed it directly in nearly 3 years. Eleanor, we need to talk, he said. About what? I asked, already knowing the answer. Vivian says you transferred to Ashford without telling either of us. I did not think you would particularly care, I said. Of course I care, he said, you are my daughter. Am I said, and the words came out flat, not bitter, just stating a fact. You told me I was not worth the investment, do you remember saying that? There was a long silence. Eleanor, that was 4 years ago, in the dining room. I do not remember saying that exactly. I remember every single word, I told him. More silence followed, and then he said maybe we should discuss this properly in person, at the graduation ceremony. We are coming for Vivian's big day, and I know you will be there too. I will see you there, Dad, I said, and ended the call. He never called back after that. That night I sat alone in my small apartment, the one I had paid for entirely with money I had earned myself, and replayed that conversation in my head. He either genuinely did not remember saying those words to me, or he had simply chosen not to. Either way, he had never truly looked at me, not in any way that mattered. But in just a few months, he would be forced to. And when that moment finally arrived, it would not be because I forced him to look. It would be because he would no longer be able to look away. The weeks leading up to graduation settled into a strange, heavy quiet. I knew they were coming, my mother, my father, Vivian, the entire picture-perfect family arriving on campus to celebrate Vivian's achievement. They had booked a hotel, planned a celebration dinner, ordered flowers for her. They still had no idea about the full picture. Vivian knew I was attending Ashford, but she did not know about the Callaway Scholars Program. She did not know about the academic honors. She certainly did not know I had been asked to speak at the ceremony. Dr. Voss called to check in with me during that final week. She had made the trip out to watch in person. "Do you want me to let your family know about the speech ahead of time?" she asked. "No," I told her, "I want them to hear it for the first time along with everyone else in that stadium." She was quiet for a moment before adding, "This is not about making them feel small." "No," I agreed honestly, "it is about finally telling the truth. If they happen to be sitting in that audience when I do, that is simply where they chose to sit." Maya drove out for the ceremony and helped me pick out a dress for the occasion, the first brand new piece of clothing I had bought for myself in nearly 2 years that did not come from a thrift store rack. It was a deep emerald green, simple and clean in its lines. "You look like you run a company," Maya told me. "I feel like I am going to be sick," I told her. "Probably the same feeling," she said, smiling. The night before graduation I could not fall asleep, and it was not entirely nerves. I kept wondering what I would actually feel the moment I saw them again. Would the old hurt come rushing back the second I saw their faces? Would some small part of me want them to feel even a fraction of the pain I had carried for years? I stared at the ceiling of my small apartment until almost 3 in the morning, searching for an honest answer. What I eventually found surprised me. I did not want revenge. I did not want them to suffer. I simply wanted to finally be free of needing anything from them at all. And tomorrow, one way or another, I would be. Graduation morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of perfect blue sky that almost felt unfair given everything riding on the day. Ashford Stadium held nearly 4,000 people, and by 9 in the morning it was already nearly full, families streaming through the gates carrying flowers and balloons, the air buzzing with excited conversation. I arrived early through a side entrance reserved for honors students and speakers. My academic gown looked different from the rest of the graduates, the standard black robe, but across my shoulders sat the gold sash marking academic honors, and pinned to my chest was the Callaway Scholar Medallion, its bronze surface catching the morning light. I took my seat in the reserved section near the front of the stage. Roughly 30 feet away in the general graduate seating, Vivian was taking photos with a group of friends, laughing, completely unaware that I was already there. In the front row of the audience, directly in the center, the very best seats in the entire stadium, sat my parents. My father wore the navy suit he saved for important occasions, fiddling with the settings on his camera. My mother wore a cream-colored dress, a large bouquet of flowers resting in her lap. Between them sat one empty chair, presumably meant for coats and bags. Not for me. It was never meant for me. The university president stepped up to the podium and the crowd slowly quieted down. "Welcome, everyone, to Ashford University's graduating class commencement ceremony," she said, and the stadium erupted in applause and cheering. I sat perfectly still with my hands folded in my lap. In a few minutes my name would be called, and everything would change. The ceremony moved through its usual stages: welcome remarks, acknowledgements, honorary recognitions, the kind of pageantry that stretches every minute out far longer than it feels like it should. Then the university president returned to the podium one final time. "And now," she said, "it is my honor to introduce this year's Callaway Scholar, who will be closing our ceremony today." My heart rate spiked instantly. A student who has shown extraordinary resilience and strength of character throughout her time here. In the audience my mother leaned toward my father to whisper something, and he nodded, adjusting his camera lens, still pointed directly at Vivian. "Please join me in welcoming Eleanor Whitlock to the stage." For one suspended second, nothing happened at all. Then I stood. 4,000 pairs of eyes turned toward me at once. I walked toward the podium, my heels clicking softly against the stage floor, the gold sash moving gently with each step, the medallion catching the light against my chest. In the front row I watched my parents' faces change in real time. My father's hand froze completely still on his camera. My mother's bouquet slid sideways off her lap. Confusion came first, then a flicker of recognition, then something that looked almost like shock settling into stillness. Vivian's head snapped toward the stage, her mouth falling open as she silently mouthed my name. I reached the podium and adjusted the microphone while the crowd applauded warmly. My parents did not move. They simply sat there frozen, as though someone had pressed pause on their entire world. For the first time in my life, they were truly looking at me, not through me, not past me toward Vivian, but directly at me. I let the applause settle before leaning toward the microphone. "Good morning everyone," I began, my voice steady and calm despite everything happening inside my chest. 5 years ago I sat at a dining room table and was told I was not worth the investment. In the front row my mother's hand flew up to cover her mouth. My father's camera hung loosely at his side, forgotten. I was told I did not have what it takes, I continued, my voice carrying clearly across the silent stadium. I was told to expect less from myself, because the people around me had already decided to expect less from me. So I learned to expect far more. I spoke about the early mornings at the coffee shop, the 5 hours of sleep a night, the instant noodles and borrowed textbooks. I spoke about what it actually means to build something entirely from nothing, not to prove anyone else wrong, but to finally prove yourself right. I did not use any names. I did not point a single finger toward anyone in that audience. I did not need to. The greatest gift I ever received, I said, was never financial support or encouragement from anyone. It was the chance to discover exactly who I am without waiting for anyone else's approval to confirm it. In the front row my mother was openly crying now, but it was not the proud joyful kind of crying you usually see at a graduation. It looked closer to grief. My father sat completely motionless, staring up at the stage as though he were looking at a total stranger. Maybe, in some real sense, he was. To anyone listening who has ever been told you are not enough, I said, pausing to let the words settle over the crowd, you are. You always have been. I looked out across that sea of faces, at the other graduates who had clearly struggled in their own ways, at the parents who had genuinely sacrificed for their children, at the friends who had shown up to believe in someone when it mattered, and yes, at my own family sitting frozen in the front row. I am not standing here today because someone believed in me, I said. I am standing here because I finally learned how to believe in myself. The applause that followed was thunderous. People rose to their feet in a full standing ovation, 4,000 strangers cheering for a girl most of them had never met before that morning. As I stepped down from the stage, one saw Theodore Calloway himself waiting near the bottom of the steps. But he was not the only one waiting for me. The reception afterward buzzed with conversation and the soft clink of celebratory drinks. I was shaking hands with one of the deans when I saw them moving through the crowd toward me, my parents, moving slowly, almost as though they were wading through water. My father reached me first. Eleanor, he said, his voice rough, why did you never tell us any of this? I accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and took a slow sip before answering. Did you ever ask? I said. He opened his mouth, then closed it again without a response. My mother arrived beside him a moment later, mascara streaked down both cheeks. Baby, I am so sorry, we did not know, she said. You knew enough, I said, keeping my voice level. You simply chose not to look closely. That is not fair, my father said. Fair, I repeated, and the word came out calm rather than sharp. You spent close to $300,000 on Vivian's education and told me to figure mine out entirely on my own. That is simply what happened. My mother reached out toward me and I took a small step back. Eleanor, please, she said. I am not angry, I told her, and I genuinely meant it. The anger had burned itself out somewhere along the way, leaving something cleaner behind it. But I am not the same person who left your house 5 years ago. My father's jaw tightened. I made a mistake, he said quietly. You said exactly what you believed at the time, I told him, meeting his eyes directly. You were right about one thing though. I was never worth the investment, not to you. But I was worth every single sacrifice I made for myself along the way. He flinched as though I had physically struck him. Theodore Calloway appeared at my elbow just then, extending his hand warmly. Miss Whitlock, remarkable speech, the foundation is proud to call you one of ours, he said. I shook his hand while my parents stood watching silently, the founder of one of the country's most respected scholarship programs treating their supposedly worthless daughter like someone genuinely valuable. I saw it land on both their faces in that moment, the full weight of everything they had missed, everything they had quietly thrown away without realizing it. After Mr. Calloway moved on to greet other graduates, I turned back to face my parents. They looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way I had never seen before. I am not going to pretend everything between us is fine, I said, because it is not. Eleanor, please, my mother whispered, can we just talk, as a family? We are talking, I said. I mean really talk, my father said, come home for the summer, let us, I cut him off gently. I have a job lined up in Chicago, I told him, I start in 2 weeks. I will not be coming home. You are cutting us off, just like that, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I am setting boundaries, I said, keeping my tone steady, there is a real difference between the two. What do you want from us, he asked, and for the first time in my entire life I saw my father look genuinely lost. Tell me what you want and I will do it. I actually considered the question seriously. I do not want anything from you anymore, I told him, that is precisely the point. I took a breath before continuing. But if you ever want to talk, really talk, you can call me. I might answer. I might not. It will depend on whether you are calling to apologize, or calling to make yourself feel better about all of this. My mother started crying again. We love you, Eleanor, she said, we have always loved you. Maybe, I said gently, but love is not only words, it is choices, and you both already made yours years ago. Vivian appeared at the edge of the small circle we had formed, hovering uncertainly. Eleanor, she said, hesitating, congratulations. Thank you, I told her. There was no hug, no tearful reconciliation in that moment, but there was no cruelty between us either. I will call you sometime, I told her, if you want that. She nodded, her eyes wet. I would like that, she said quietly. I turned and walked away from all three of them, not running, not escaping, simply moving forward. Dr. Voss was waiting near the exit with a quiet, proud smile on her face. You did well, she said. I am free, I told her, and for the very first time in my life, I actually meant it completely. The ripples from that morning started before my parents had even left the campus grounds. At the reception I watched the slow realization spread through a crowd of family, friends and acquaintances. A woman my mother knew from her social circle approached her directly. Patricia, I did not know Eleanor attended Ashford, and a Callaway scholar, you must be so proud, the woman said. My mother's smile looked like it physically hurt to hold. Yes, we are very proud, she managed. How on earth did you manage to keep something like this quiet, the woman asked. My mother did not have an answer ready. Over the following weeks the questions only multiplied. My father's business associates began asking about me. I saw your daughter's speech online somewhere, incredible story, you must have really pushed her toward excellence, one of them said. He could not tell them the truth, that he had done the exact opposite for years. Vivian called me 3 days after the ceremony. Mom has not really stopped crying, she told me. Dad barely talks at all, he just sits there most evenings. I am sorry to hear that, I said. Are you actually sorry, she asked. I thought about it honestly for a moment. I do not want them to suffer, I told her, but I am also not responsible for managing their feelings about any of this. There was a long silence on the line. I am sorry, Vivian finally said, I should have asked more questions, I should have paid closer attention, I was so wrapped up in my own life and I know that. I knew you were not paying attention, I told her, you had no real reason to notice anything different. Do you hate me, she asked quietly. No, I told her, and I meant it, I do not have the energy left to hate anyone. I just want to keep moving forward. Could we maybe get coffee sometime, start fresh, she asked. I thought about my sister, the girl who had received everything and still somehow ended up feeling empty in her own different way. Yes, I told her, I would like that. 2 months after graduation I stood inside my new apartment in Chicago. It was a small studio with one window facing a brick wall and a kitchen barely larger than a closet. But it was entirely mine. I had signed the lease using money from my very first paycheck at a financial consulting firm called Marlowe & Partners, an entry-level position with long hours and a steep learning curve ahead of me. I had never felt happier in my life. Dr. Voss called one Saturday morning to check in. How is the big city treating you, she asked. Exhausting, exciting, exactly everything everyone warned me about, I told her. She laughed warmly. That sounds about right, she said. I am proud of you, Eleanor. I hope you know that. I do, I told her, thank you for absolutely everything. Maya visited me the following weekend, walked into my tiny studio apartment, looked around slowly, and declared it precisely as small and slightly depressing as she had expected. Then she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. You actually did it, Nora, she said, using the nickname only she ever used for me, you really did it. One evening I found a handwritten letter waiting in my mailbox, 3 full pages in my mother's familiar looping handwriting. Dear Eleanor, it began, I do not expect you to forgive us, I am honestly not sure I would either if our positions were reversed. She wrote about regret, about the countless small ways she had failed me over the years, about watching me on that stage and slowly realizing she had been looking at a stranger who also happened to be her own daughter. I know I cannot undo what already happened, she wrote, but I want you to know, I see you now, I finally see exactly who you have become, and I am so deeply sorry I did not see you sooner than this. I read the letter twice through, then folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. I did not write back right away. Not because I wanted to punish her with silence, but because I genuinely needed time to figure out what I actually wanted to say in return, if anything at all. For once in my life, the choice was entirely mine to make on my own timeline. Here is how it all eventually settled. I used to believe love was something you had to earn, that if I were simply smart enough, good enough, successful enough, my parents would finally see me clearly, as though their approval were some prize waiting at the finish line of an invisible race. 5 years of struggle taught me something completely different. You cannot force someone to love you the right way. You cannot earn what should have been freely given to you from the very beginning. And you cannot spend your entire life waiting for other people to finally notice your worth. At some point you have to notice it yourself, without waiting for permission. I look at my life now, my apartment, my job, the friends who chose me freely, and I recognize something important. I built every single piece of it myself. Not out of anger, and not out of spite, but out of pure necessity. My parents' rejection did not break me the way they probably expected it to. It rebuilt me into someone entirely new. The girl who once sat in that dining room desperate for her father's approval, she simply does not exist anymore. In her place stands a woman who knows exactly what she is worth and no longer needs anyone else's validation to confirm it. Some nights I still think about all of it, the family dinners I was never invited to, the holiday photographs without my face in them, the enormous amount of money spent on my sister's education while I ate instant noodles in a tiny rented room. It still hurts sometimes, if I am being completely honest. I do not think that particular hurt ever fully disappears. But it no longer controls me the way it used to. I have learned something over these past few years that took a long time to fully understand. Forgiveness is not about releasing someone else from responsibility for what they did. It is about finally releasing your own grip on the pain itself. I am not entirely there yet. Not completely. But I am working on it, and for the first time in my life, I am working on it purely for myself, not to make anyone else more comfortable, not to keep some fragile peace, simply for me. 6 months after graduation my phone rang one evening and I saw my father's name on the screen. I almost let it go straight to voicemail. Almost. "Hello Eleanor," he said when I finally answered, his voice sounding tired in a way I had never heard before. "Thank you for picking up, I was not sure you would," he said. There was a silence before he continued. "I deserve that," he admitted. I waited without responding. "I have been thinking every single day since graduation about what I would say to you if you ever answered," he said, "and I keep coming up completely empty." "Then just say what is actually true," I told him. Another long pause followed. "I was wrong," he finally said, "not just about the money, about everything. The way I treated you, the things I said, all the years I did not call, did not ask, did not," his voice cracked slightly. "I have no excuse for any of it. I was your father and I failed you completely." I listened to him breathe unevenly on the other end of the line. "I hear you," I finally said, "that is all I have for you right now." "What did you expect me to say?" he asked. "I am not sure," he admitted. "I suppose I thought maybe you would tell me exactly how to fix this." "It is not my responsibility to tell you how to repair what you broke," I told him gently but firmly. More silence followed. "You are right," he said, sounding older than I had ever heard him sound before. "You are absolutely right about that." I took a slow breath. "If you genuinely want to try, I am willing to let you try," I told him. "You are?" he asked, sounding surprised. "I am not promising anything specific," I said. "No family dinners, no pretending everything is suddenly fine between us. But if you want to have an honest conversation with me, no deflecting, no excuses, I will listen." "That is more than I probably deserve," he said. "Yes," I agreed, "it probably is." He laughed quietly, a small broken sound. "You have always been the strong one, Eleanor," he said. "I was just too blind to ever see it clearly." "Yes," I told him, "you were." We talked for a few more minutes after that, nothing especially profound, just two people slowly trying to find some common ground across years of accumulated damage. It was not forgiveness exactly. But it was a genuine start. It has now been 2 full years since that graduation morning. I am still living in Chicago, still working at Marlowe and Partners, though I have been promoted twice since starting there. I am beginning my graduate business degree this fall, fully paid for by my company as part of their leadership development program. The girl who once survived on instant noodles and 5 hours of sleep a night would hardly recognize the life I have now. But I have not forgotten her. I carry her with me every single day, because she is the reason any of this exists at all. Vivian and I meet for coffee roughly once a month now. It is occasionally still a little awkward between us. We are essentially learning how to be sisters as adults, which feels strange given that we were never really close as children either. But she is genuinely trying, and I can see that effort clearly now. "I am sorry I never saw any of it back then," she told me during our last coffee date. "All those years I was so focused on what I was receiving, I never once stopped to ask what you were not." I know, I told her. How do you not hate me for that, she asked. Because you did not create the system we both grew up inside of, I told her, you simply benefited from it without realizing the cost. My parents visited me in Chicago last month, the very first time either of them had ever come to see this city or this life I built. It was uncomfortable at moments, somewhat stilted in conversation. My father spent roughly half the visit apologizing in different ways. My mother spent the other half quietly crying. But they came. They showed up at my door, in my city, inside the life I built entirely without their help. That fact alone meant something real to me. I am not ready to call us a family again in the full sense of that word. That word still carries too much weight, too much accumulated history behind it. But we are something now. We are working on becoming something. Last month I wrote a check for $15,000 to a scholarship fund at Maple Ridge State, given anonymously, specifically for students without family financial support behind them. Maya actually cried when I told her about it. Nora, you are genuinely changing someone's entire life with this, she said. Someone once changed mine, I told her, thinking about Dr. Voss, about those early coffee shop shifts before sunrise, about the night I first bookmarked the Callaway program never truly believing I would actually win it, and about how far I have come since then, and how much further I still want to go. If something in this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt overlooked or underestimated or told outright that you were not good enough by the very people who were supposed to love you the most, I want you to hear this clearly. They were wrong about you. They were always wrong. Your worth is not determined by who happens to notice it. It is not a number written on a check, it is not a seat saved at a table, it is not a place reserved in a photograph. Your worth exists fully whether or not a single other person on this earth ever acknowledges it out loud. I spent 18 years of my life waiting for my parents to truly notice me. I spent 5 more years proving to myself that I never actually needed them to. And here is what I finally learned along the way. The approval I had spent so long chasing was never going to fill the emptiness I carried inside. Only I could ever do that for myself. Some of you listening tonight are estranged from your own families. Some of you are still quietly fighting for scraps of attention you should never have had to fight for in the first place. Some of you are only just beginning to realize that the love you are currently receiving is simply not the love you actually deserve. Wherever you happen to be on that particular journey tonight, I want you to know something important. It is okay to protect yourself. It is okay to set firm boundaries. It is okay to decide that your own well-being matters more than keeping an uneasy peace. And it is okay to eventually forgive, but only once you are genuinely ready, never a single moment before that. You do not need your parents, your siblings, or anyone else in your life to confirm what you already quietly know to be true about yourself. You are enough exactly as you are right now. You always have been, even on the days it felt like nobody around you could see it. Because if a girl who was once told she was not worth the investment can stand on a stage in front of 4,000 strangers wearing a scholar's medallion she earned entirely on her own, then there is genuinely nothing standing in your way either. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If it meant something to you tonight, please share it with someone in your life who might need to hear it too.